Good morning, good afternoon, good evening in our first panel in the E3 conference, the student conference. My name is Ahmed Elbanbi. I will moderate this panel. We have four panelists, and basically we have more than 120 years of experience on the panel, so hopefully it will be an interesting panel. Let me introduce myself very quickly. I'm Professor of Petroleum Engineering and the Chair of the Petroleum and Energy Engineering Department at the American University in Cairo. And my background is all petroleum engineering, two halves. One half of my career is in the industry and the other half is in academia. My specialty is reservoir engineering and reservoir simulation. Terry, please introduce yourself.
Yes, so my name is Terry Palisch. I'm currently the Vice President of Engineering and Technology at Cairo Ceramics, which basically means I lead our R&D department. And then I'm also the current SPE President, the 2024 SPE President. And I'm located in Dallas.
Very good, thank you. Lyle, please present yourself.
Yeah, my name is Lyle. I have a consulting firm called Frac Diagnostics. It's a legacy firm that started with Pinnacle Technologies in '92, and I've been in the industry since middle '70s, and I'm located on the west side of Houston.
Ivan.
Hello, my name is Ivan Gill. My background is I'm a petroleum engineer, but I have a PhD in geomechanics from the University of Oklahoma. Been in the industry for almost 20 years. Right now, I'm the manager of the Unconventional Reservoirs team in BP America. I'm based in Houston. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. For all the attendees, what we're going to do is actually each one of the panelists will have a few minutes to talk about our ideas for the future of petroleum engineering, and then after that we'll take your questions and hopefully we can answer them. So the order of presentations, we'll start with Terry, please. So please go ahead and share your presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so everything looks good, Ahmed? Perfect.
Yes.
All right. So thank you, first of all, for the invitation, and congratulations to everybody who's joining. This is just one step on the way of creating your energy future. So I'm excited to be here. I always enjoy talking to students and young professionals. And what I want to do is just cover, just briefly as an introduction, my view of the future of not just petroleum engineering, but of our industry, because I think they're obviously very much related. And by the way, I am a petroleum engineer by degree from Missouri University of Science and Technology. So let me just kind of start with energy itself. Okay, energy is the building blocks of life. And what I mean by that is all life forms need energy. You and I need energy. It's in the form of chemical energy. We call it food. And if you look at the course of humankind over the last thousands and to some extent millions of years, there's been three major energy milestones. The first is when we discovered fire, because discovering fire allowed us to open up a whole nother realm of eating or protein source, and that is meat. It also allowed us to cook some of the roots and things that were not easily digestible by our bodies. About 8,000 years ago, the next milestone came about when we discovered agriculture. And up until that point, we spent every waking moment looking for our next meal. And so once we figured out we could grow food near where we lived, we could work on things like shelter and things like that. But then comes the third energy milestone, the milestone of the discovery of fossil fuels, first coal and then followed quickly by oil and natural gas. And if you look at the chart on the right, that shows the impact of fossil fuels because it ushered in the Industrial Revolution. And up until the mid-1800s, life expectancy was about 25 to 35 years old, depending on where you lived. And now it exceeds 70 in most areas of the world, with the exception of some areas of Africa. So energy, of course, over time has been had these three energy milestones. So let me take you down a little bit of another path here now on what the population and energy consumption relationship is. And so on the chart on the right, what you see is a graphic representation of where all 8 billion people live in the world today. And the coloration represents continents. So, of course, blue is Asia. And if we look at the blue continent, the Asia, where there are two countries, India and China, that both have about 1.4 billion people. And if we add in the continent of Africa, Africa has about 1.3 billion people. So that's the green box. So I choose these three because they all have about the same population. So now if we look at their energy consumption currently, China uses about 44,000 terawatt hours, or about 31 megawatt hours per person. India, same population, uses about 10,000 terawatt hours or 7 megawatt hours per person. The continent of Africa, while very diverse, some areas of Africa have no access to energy and others are similar to the West, on average uses about 4. So you can see those three areas of the world with similar population use very differing amounts, and they're in very differing places in the energy consumption matrix. And just to put this in perspective, the U.S., who is one of the more advanced regions of the world, uses about 80. So China, while way up there, uses less than half of the energy per person as the U.S. So why is this important? Well, let's look at this chart that shows the last 30 plus years of energy consumption in China and India. The dark blue lines represent China's energy consumption over the last 30 plus years. And you can see that up until about the year 2002, China was using about a similar amount of energy consumption. And then, of course, they began developing their country, and you can see the dramatic increase in energy consumption there. In contrast, look at India. India is still running along where China was 25 years ago. So if we extrapolate that back, you can see India is essentially 25 years behind China. And as we all know, India is beginning to develop as well. And just to put this all in perspective, Africa sits right here. Africa is about 20 years behind behind India, or 45 years behind China. So my point here is I'm not predicting how quickly these energy consumption is going to grow in these countries, but it does show you the demand that's going to occur at some point in time. And remember, again, China is less than half of the US. So what does this mean? So let's look at energy consumption by source of energy historically. So if we go back through the last 60 years, you can see that energy consumption has continued to grow dramatically. And it's because of developing nations. During that time, when you look at where we are today, hydrocarbons make up a little over half of the mix. Renewables are about less than 15%. What's going to happen in the future? Okay, there's a lot of debate out there, but this is one interpretation. This is Scott Tinker's view. This is actually very similar to what the EIA just released recently. But if we look at what's going to happen, of course, they're predicting that continued energy demand will continue to grow. But if you look at how the mix is going to occur, really at this point in time, nuclear, natural gas, oil, and coal, so that's orange, red, green, and gray, are going to stay flat as a total. Okay, renewables, the importance of renewables is going to be they're going to make up the gap. So renewables are going to grow dramatically, as we all know. But hydrocarbons, even in the year 2060 plus, are going to make up 50% of the energy mix. The point here is we can go through a lot of different scenarios, but of course the point is hydrocarbons, oil and natural gas, are going to be tremendously important going forward for many decades to come. So the point of what I'm trying to show you is this. First of all, energy demand is going to continue to grow for many, many different reasons, not the least of which is population. Second, to meet these energy needs, it's going to take all energy sources. I like to call it energy optionality. So it's not going to be just renewables. It's not going to be just coal. It's going to be oil and gas, nuclear, and everything else. And then last, I believe that oil and gas demand is going to continue to be a significant portion of the mix. And we could spend quite a bit of time talking about what it's going to take to meet that need, but I'm going to just leave it at that right now. Maybe we can talk about it during the panel. Which leads me then finally to the energy trilemma. So, of course, if we know that humanity needs energy, growing amounts of energy, the other important part of this is it needs to be not only accessible and affordable, and also reliable and secure. So we have to be able to afford it and access it, and it has to be there on demand, but it also is going to need to be evergreen and decarbonized. And that's what many call the trilemma. But for those in our industry, those of you on the call, those of you who have elected to join the industry, I think that's not a trilemma. I think it's an opportunity. I think that's the opportunity for all of us to show the world that we can continue to meet the world's energy demands and energy needs that meet the needs of the energy trilemma. And how are we going to do that? What's it going to take? Well, our industry, I believe, is well suited for this. If you're in the oil and gas production side of the industry, so you're concerned with producing more and more oil and natural gas, then it's going to take some tremendous advancements in technology. I've listed just a few of the things that we know of that we don't know how to recover yet. So taking our recovery of shale oil from 10% to higher amounts is going to take technology that we haven't discovered yet. We have, of course, we're in deep water, but there's plenty of oil and natural gas in the ultra deep water that we need to access. Heavy oil makes up a tremendous amount of resource across the world, high pressure, high temperature, and so on. The other part of this, though, is that we need to continue to work on decarbonizing as well. Remember the third part of the trilemma. And we can do that both in our industry, so whether it's working on methane emissions or reduction in flaring, or electrification of our operations, such as our frac fleets and our drilling rigs. We are currently working on all of these things in our industry, and it takes the best and the brightest to do that. The other part are companion industries, such as carbon capture and storage. Some people are looking at direct air capture as a part of this, the capture part. Geothermal. Both of these technologies are going to require people from our industry. Reservoir engineers, production engineers, completions, drilling, geology, all of those are critical to advancing CCUS and geothermal. So regardless of whether you want to sit in the oil and gas production side of things or you want to sit in the decarbonizing side of things, we need everybody in our industry. And I think everybody in the industry can make this work. And so if nobody tells you this in your career, I want to tell you to be proud of what we've done for humanity, be proud of what you're entering, and proud of your profession. And so thank you again. I look forward to speaking on the panel. I just want to leave you with one final thought. I mean, the only way we're going to solve this is with the best and the brightest, and it's going to be people like yourselves that are entering the industry right now. You're going to discover great things. You're going to bring a lot of technologies and new things to the table. And someday we'll look back on the generations that are coming in now and with a lot of pride, same way, seeing what they've discovered as well. So thank you very much. And I think I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Terry. Very insightful. And we go with Lyle now, please.
Hey, Lyle, just so you know, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. So, is that better? Did the slide show up?
Yeah.
Okay, so this talk will dovetail quite a bit with Terry's talk. And,
Lyle, can you swap screens? You're showing your, or just duplicate your screen up on display settings.
where?
Display settings at the top, middle.
Display settings up there.
Displayed on the task to the left, just above your slide.
Just above the slide?
You see end slideshow and display settings?
No.
To the left. I'll tell you what.
There you go. You got it. That's it. That's it. There you go. Perfect. Just duplicate it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. So thank you for that. The bad thing about getting old is you don't like to do something. So we're going to go on. So I want to talk a little bit about the role that I play in consulting, which is principally around the unconventional world, unconventional resources around the world, and kind of tell an overall case history as to how the evolution of this business has gone. So in the past, the unconventional resources or reservoirs are not considered to be a viable target. They were called source rock. We all say, well, oil or gas comes out of shale and goes into the formation above it. So we always targeted the pay zone above the oil or gas. But then about in 1981, a visionary geology team led by Mitchell Energy changed all that. They set about the idea of trying to develop the Barnett Shale. Now, there were other shale plays, particularly up in northern USA, that were targeted before this one. Those are not considered to be the better, more cases. So anyway, back to the Barnett. Over the next 15 plus years, stepped towards making unconventional economic really slow process. We made some major milestones, one of which is we found out that pumping very thick frac fluids were not smart. We needed to pump very thin frac fluids instead and carry a lot of profit and pump a lot of water to try to take advantage of the isotropic stress conditions that the better shale reservoirs live with. Then we found out that hooking up series of fractures in a horizontal well was a lot smarter idea. And at this point, we started really optimize the art of completing unconventional resources. That leads us up to about 2008, 2009. Oil benchmarked about $152 dollars a barrel, and gas was in some places up to $14 an MCF. But the market effect hit because we started making so much gas that the supply was way out of keeping with demand. And so then the next thing that happened is we had to look at ways to lower the cost, because the reality of unconventional resources is that the quality of the resources got worse, lower and lower. Back when I started, we used to talk about millidarcy rock, 0.1 millidarcy or 1 millidarcy rock. Then we started hearing the word microdarcy popped up, then nanodarcy, and then particularly in the Utica in the northeastern United States, we started hearing the term picodarcy. Also, the other thing is we started seeing production values drop. And that, if you want to see a case history of this, look at the transition in the Wall Street Journal. We went from addressing reservoirs in terms of estimated ultimate recovery, and now we just talk about the initial potential. Fizzle not to stay. And so what has happened in the unconventional world is that petroleum engineers are being replaced by accountants. This is a little graph I put together, talks about how we started out in the play, this being years of time. We start off with the ideology of the geologist. We wouldn't have anything to talk about if we didn't have the geological impact. And then they kind of hand over the process to petroleum engineers. How do we optimize it? How do we get it done? And like I said, we found out that we had to go from thick fluids to thin fluids. We're better off with horizontal wells. We can complete wells now in the pay target now becomes the source rock. But then with the decline of the quality of the resource and the price of the product that we're selling, oil or gas, it starts to become a cost-driven process. So right now in the industry, we are looking at very genericized completions, and mostly it's all driven by cost because of how we complete wells. Now, this isn't every case, and I don't address that's part of the market, but that's overall where it's headed. So it would make you think, well, shoot, what am I going to do? You know, I'm a petroleum engineer, I'm a student, I'm trying to learn how to do stuff like this because of what Terry said. You know, the history of petroleum engineering, we bring inexpensive, cost reasonable energy to the market on demand. How can I adapt to that? Well, here's a fork in the road for you. The rest of the world outside of North America is still milli and micro Darcy status. You might be better off finding out you need to study a second language or culture other than one you grew up with. I mean, when you get to the Middle East, there are exceptions, of course, but there's a lot of pretty darn good quality rock over there in Pakistan and India and the Middle East itself, Oman, even Dubai and Abu Dhabi, there's in Saudi Arabia, and those worlds need your technical expertise. Okay. The other fork is that in the road is that petroleum engineers, by their very training and educational background, are the most diverse and adaptive engineering disciplines. I mean, petroleum engineering is a combination of civil, thus mechanical, a lot of chemical engineering. I mean, you have to study those three, particularly not so much electrical engineering, but you have to study civil and mechanical and chemical engineering. Another thing that's really coming into play, and I'm seeing this a lot, I like it, is the geothermal world, where we're taking out abandoned or soon to be abandoned reservoirs that are pretty deep and just trying to cycle some liquids into them to generate electricity. And it's really becomes a pretty nice environmental upside to our business. And I have to tell you that no other discipline is better suited to that than petroleum. Okay, and then once the world discovers that the energy transition is just that, this lends exactly back to what the big graph that Terry put up, saying even in 2050, we still have to have a lot of oil and gas. It's not a revolution, it's a transition. And one of the realities about oil and gas is, versus electricity, you can't make plastics out of electricity. You can't make perfumes and all the things that we make out of oil and gas out of electricity. It is just an energy source. So you have to have those items in our portfolio of sources of energy. So there will always be a need for an older skill of developing gas, oil, and managing water disposal. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Lyle. Another interesting presentation, and let's move now to Ivan.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks fine. You can also put it on. Okay. Slideshow.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, very good. Can you hear me well? Okay, very good. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's quite a treat to be here, right? So the title of my presentation is Considerations about the Future of Petroleum Engineering, and I'm calling it that way because it contains some of my personal thoughts on where we are going, right? So I'm going to repeat some of the material that Terry presented, not exactly the same material, but kind of the same information, right? And I decided to focus this presentation and try to put myself in your shoes as students, right? So um, so many years ago, I was in your shoes, and people used to tell me, well, we're going to run out of oil, right? So why are you studying petroleum engineering? You're not gonna have a job in 10, 20 years, right? And here I am, closer to retirement that I care to admit, and we still have a lot of things to do, right? I decided to do it this way because actually, about a week ago, I got a call from a friend's son, right? He's a guy that he's coming out of school. He studied chemical engineering, and he got a offer from two different oil companies and a company outside the oil industry, right? And the kid was asking me, what is your advice? What should I do, right? Actually, he got a job from BP, which is the company I work for, and from another company. He was asking me, well, I'm inclined to go to the oil industry. So which one would you advise me to take, right? I'm not gonna tell you which one I I selected or I advised him to take, and he was also asking me about the choice that he had in one of those companies. He had a choice of going into the energy transition, like going into CCUS and geothermal, or going into the hydrocarbon production area, right? And he was also asking me about that one, right? So I tried to put this presentation together with those questions in mind, right? Again, I was trying to put myself in your shoes, right? So I'm gonna start with what I think we are heading. So this is kind of the same message that Terry presented earlier. So what you see on the left-hand side, let me change my pointer. Can you see my pointer? Okay, very good. So what you see is a prediction, right? And you're gonna find many different predictions out in different papers and different publications. But in general, what you see is that people are predicting that yes, we're gonna need energy, is gonna keep on increasing, but at some point in the future, either 5 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, we're gonna see a peak and it's gonna decrease, right? So what I'm showing here is something that I found in BP's Energy Outlook. Is basically a prediction that is updated every year, and this is the latest version. And what you see here is that energy consumption for the whole world is expected to continue to grow, right, under different scenarios, but it's expected to peak either after 10 years, 20, 30 years, right? So within the next 2 or 3 decades, it is expected to come down a little bit, right? Or a lot, right? Depending on which scenario you believe. The three curves shown here present the scenario where we are basically doing everything that we can to stay below a change in temperature, a global change in temperature of 1.5 degrees Celsius. The orange one is the one that takes into account the different things that we need to do to stay below 2 Celsius, below to a change of 2 Celsius. And the green one is a new one that was put together based on what is already happening, right? Probably showing that we are not meeting some of those goals of stay below those temperature targets, right? So that's the green curve that you see over here, right? But whichever scenario you choose to believe, what you see is that energy consumption is expected to be within a couple of decades, right? I would say, and the main factors affecting these projections are economic growth and population growth, as Terry said, and also energy efficiency, right? So nowadays we can develop some of the same economic activities, but using a lesser amount of energy. So that's what I'm talking about when I say energy efficiency, right? But it's not only about the amount of energy, right? But where it comes from, and we are talking about CO2 emissions, because I think the scientific community is now in agreement, and they say that climate change is real, right? So we need to do things in a different way to account for this new situation, right? So in summary, what I'm showing here is that the world is demanding more, is demanding cleaner, and is demanding reliable energy. And I think this was also alluded to in Terry's presentation, right? So as a petroleum engineer and as a petroleum engineering student, what does it mean for me? So that's the main question that I want to answer in the next couple of slides, right? So the first part that I wanted to show you is the maybe not so good news, right? So we are expecting fossil fuels, depending on the scenario that you choose. Again, we're expecting the fossil fuels, the share to decrease, either the share of the primary energy that is consuming in the world to decrease either a little bit or a lot, right? Again, in Terry's presentation was the share was mostly flat, right? So there are different scenarios that you choose to believe, and this is probably one of the some of these are some of the most pessimistic ones, right? So as a result, what they're saying is that oil demand may decrease in the future, right? Maybe a little bit, maybe a lot, and natural gas demand as a transition fuel or as a transition element is gonna, in some scenarios, the demand is gonna decrease, and in some other scenarios, it's actually gonna increase, right? So we are saying that oil production is expected to peak within 1 or 2 decades. Natural gas production may be decreasing or maybe even increasing, right? So what I think it means is that maybe there is a possibility for a smaller workforce producing hydrocarbons, right? So to me, that's probably the not so good news, right? Now, however, the really good news is that as some doors are closing or the size of those doors is decreasing, there are new doors that are opening up, right? So what we see is that as we go into this energy transition, we're gonna see new opportunities, right? And I'm just presenting two of them based on the same scenarios that I presented before, right? On the left-hand side, you see that the amount of hydrogen that is going to be produced and that is going to the share in the energy mix is going to increase either by a little bit or by a lot, right? When it comes to hydrogen production, it's not only about producing the hydrogen and transporting the hydrogen, right? An element, a very important element here is hydrogen storage, right? Because right now, when we have small hydrogen plants, we store hydrogen in tanks at the surface, right? But as we scale this up and we make plants much larger, and we are going to need places to store, we are going to need much larger places to store the hydrogen, right? And of course, we will have to go underground. We will have to store it in impermeable formations, in salt domes. And this is going to demand some of the same skills and some of the same knowledge that we have as petroleum engineers, sorry. The same thing goes for carbon capture. I think carbon capture is expected to, or the number of projects and the capacity of those projects is also expected to grow either by a little bit or by a whole lot, right? So the error bars here are between billion ton in 2050 to about 6 billion tons, right? So there is another opportunity in CCUS and in general in carbon capture that could be that is opening new doors for petroleum engineers, because as I mentioned, in the same case for hydrogen, there are many of the same considerations that we have in hydrocarbon injection and storage will come and will be valid for CCUS, for carbon capture and utilization and storage, right? So there are many opportunities that we are expecting to see. And actually in BP, in the company that I work for, we are building new teams and we are having a lot of activity related to things like CCUS and hydrogen storage, right? So many more opportunities are opening up. And I'm talking about hydrogen storage and CCUS here, but also geothermal is another one that we are starting to look at, and energy storage, right? We are also looking at storing air at high pressure, right? To be pulled up whenever needed, right? We are talking about injecting water at high pressure, right? And using it as a battery for energy accumulation. So those projects are also going to need some of the same skills that as petroleum engineers we already have, right? So this is, I mean, to me, this is really good news because it opens up the market and the opportunity for you guys as students, right? So the last slide that I have here is what does it mean for me as a petroleum engineer, right? And what I think it does mean is that to be successful as a petroleum engineer, you need to be prepared for opportunities that you have in the present and opportunities that will come up or become more important in the future, right? So in BP, we're looking for people that are adapting to these new challenges, right? We still need to have in a petroleum engineer, we still need to have the traditional basic knowledge of petroleum engineering, right? So we need to understand reservoir engineering, we need to understand drilling, we need to understand completion, we need to understand production, right? All of those elements are going to be important for the present, right? Because we are still producing hydrocarbon. In BP, half of our budget is going to production of hydrocarbon and half of our budget is going into transition engines, right? Or transition energy, right? We also need to have to see people with a stronger background in business and economics, because at the end of the day, we are here to produce energy, but also to make a profit, right? So we need to make sure that people understand that and can relate their processes and their operations to the end goal, which is being economic, right? As I said, some of the skills that we have as petroleum engineers will move into the energy transition, into CCUS, into geothermal, into hydrogen and energy storage, right? So people will have the opportunity to make that move and to make that transition, right? So you need to be flexible, right? And in addition to that, we are looking for people to be effective at using new technologies, right? Such as data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, because that is helping us in the present to improve the processes and the economics of producing hydrocarbon, but also in the future is going to help us with the new projects. Again, CCUS, hydrogen, and all the other elements that I mentioned, right? And with that, I would like to close.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for everyone. I also have a few slides to talk about, and then we'll take your questions afterwards. So please unshare, Ivan, so I can share my slides.
Okay, I stop sharing now.
Okay. As panelists, we did not agree that much to give one message or anything. It actually, as you can see in the last three presentations, and you will see some of my presentation as well, we agree on lots of things, especially regarding what we need to do and regarding the future also. But that was by accident, to be honest with the students. This is what we believe in after spending 20 to 40 years of in the petroleum industry. I will try to present my point of view also in exploring the future of petroleum engineering. And I just want to show very quickly the population growth. It is scary. There are models that show that we may not continue growing with the same rate, which I think is reasonable. But anyway, we'll keep growing as population. Of course, with that, we need huge amount of energy. So why do we need the huge amount of energy? Population growth, urbanization, and rising standard of living. One of the things that's related to rising standard of living, I just wanted to point everyone to the fact that computing is very, very hungry for energy. So the computers that we use, the ChatGPT, all artificial intelligence models, all of these servers and data centers and big data and everything that the new generation is talking about is extremely hungry for energy. So the expectations is that for computing alone, it will contribute to huge demand. This is similar to what Terry mentioned. I just wanted to show the disparity in energy consumption per capita in different places. So you see here at the bottom, Africa, you see other places, and you see the Middle East, for example, is growing. So this extreme disparity in energy utilized per capita is one of the factors that tell us, without really thinking too much, that the demand for energy is growing and will continue to grow for many, many years to come. This is the primary energy sources over the past 200 years. I'm not showing this slide to show how much the coal contribution, oil contribution, and gas contribution compared to renewables now, and compared to all the renewables now and the nuclear. I'm actually showing this to drive a very important fact. Traditional biomass is still in consumption today. So this is all what we had 200 years ago, and we are actually still using traditional biomass, and we increased over the years the amount of energy that we extract from traditional biomass. If we look at the coal started around 1850, and it has been growing, still growing until today. Then oil came. We are consuming all the oil that we can produce, and it is growing. Gas came along, we're consuming all the gas and still growing. If we look at the past 50 years, so I zoomed into this graph, year on year, it is growing except for this year here, 2008, 2009, when we had a recession, and the Corona year. This is when we locked everyone. We locked everyone up in their houses. Other than these two, year on year, there is a lot of energy demand. You see many statistics that show that renewable is growing. Yes, when we look at percentages of total, the renewable is growing. And of course, especially the solar and the wind. But when we look at amounts, the amount of energy that we consume year after year, all energy sources are growing, which means we need to keep extracting oil, gas, and even coal. I wanted to touch on another point here, because we talk a lot about oil transition, net zero, and renewables and all of that. All of these ideas are great, but we have to look at what we can do and improve what we have. So the elephant in the room here, some of the panelists alluded to some of these points as well, but let me recap them in the following. Replacement of petrochemical products and jet fuel. The world uses around 6,000 petrochemical products. They have to come from oil or gas. They cannot come from any other source of energy. Another important issue here when we talk about electricity generation from solar panels, we still have to manufacture the solar panels, and after using the solar panels for a few years, we still have to dispose of the solar panels in environmentally sound way. Manufacturing of solar panels requires minerals. Minerals require mining. Mining is energy intensive and emits a lot of CO2. I just want to remind everyone with that. Same goes for the manufacturing and disposal of lithium-ion batteries that are needed for electric cars, etc., etc. Another challenging point when we talk about oil transition is providing base load for power supply. Renewables at best are fluctuating energy sources. When we talk about the base load is the minimum electricity that a country needs to generate to lighten the streets and to have the security within a city or within a country. And of course to run its industry and all of that. So the base load has to come from for one or a combination of the four sources: coal, oil, gas, and nuclear. Another point we need to look into is the total system energy efficiency. So, for example, some industrial applications require high temperature. The high temperature needs the industry to burn either usually coal or gas. We cannot get high temperature from solar panels, for example. Another issue that we're discussing a lot is the biofuel, especially the modern biofuels. Yes, it's great to produce biofuels, but remember also to produce biofuels, we need fresh water. Fresh water in certain places is scarce. It's even more scarce than the energy itself. So having all of these, we really need to look into the future with the fossil fuels and the non-fossil fuels as well. Now, the other panelists discussed additional skills that are required in petroleum engineering. Coming from academia here, we need also to make sure that we understand that academia has constraints. The constraints include the following: accreditation constraints. So many students think that a group of professors sit in the department meeting and they can change the curriculum in 1 year or so. No, unfortunately, this doesn't happen because we have to look into the accreditation. The accreditation requires the program to have certain fundamental courses and certain skills for every discipline. Another important point here is the job market reaction to new programs and blended programs, especially blended programs. There have been in the past trials to merge, for example, mechanical engineering power concentration with petroleum, so we can create an all-rounded energy engineer. Unfortunately, what happens when we try these things is that the accreditation bodies come back and say, you're graduating a diluted petroleum engineer, or you're graduating a diluted mechanical engineer, or you're graduating a diluted electrical engineer with power option or energy option. So we have to be vigilant in that, and we have to look into what we want to graduate. In other words, the things that we can do and the skills that we can add to the students have to be added without really diluting the important skills that they learn within their discipline. Another issue that we have in petroleum engineering education in general is that the academia needs a stable intake of students. Over the years, oil price goes up, the enrollment in petroleum engineering programs increases, oil price goes down, enrollment goes down with the oil price. This has been very difficult for universities to manage. You will tell me, okay, in every universities are not businesses, but in every business, in every company, they also like to work with more or less same number of employees, etc. In academia, it's a bit different because to prepare an instructor or a professor or someone who's working in research and teaching, etc., usually it takes more years and until the person reaches autonomy and until the person can actually deliver what he's supposed to deliver in his job. So academia, more than the industry, needs to work with stable intake of students. Having said that, discussing the constraints in education, what can we do for the future of petroleum engineering? Number one, I think all the panelists agree with this point here. I'm trying to summarize. We cannot get rid of core competencies of petroleum engineering. And these core competencies, some of them are very unique to petroleum engineers. So, for example, the formation evaluation skills, geology, the background in geology, probably mining and petroleum engineers are the only ones that really study geology in some great detail. Other skills that we cannot get rid of, and they are very much emphasized in petroleum engineering, is how we handle the risk in our projects, and also the concept of heterogeneity. Usually when you talk to engineers, they say 1 + 1 = 2, but when you add geoscience to engineering, which we do in petroleum engineering, then we have to look into heterogeneity, and repeatability is not the same as in other engineering disciplines. Another point here, when we develop the future of the future petroleum engineers, we need to be cautious when we're dealing with blended programs, adding lots of different courses from other disciplines into petroleum. I'm not saying we cannot do that. What I'm saying is we need to have the vision clear with the skills that we add to typical petroleum engineers. Focus on adaptability and lifelong learning. So for students, we get a lot this question. How can I become a good petroleum engineer, or how can I be ready for the oil transition or for the environment and all of that? Well, there has to be in our petroleum engineering education, there has to be focus on adaptability. We can change, we can transfer the skills to other things, which I think is there in petroleum engineering, and we see a lot of our graduates taking non-petroleum engineering jobs and actually excelling in these non-petroleum engineering jobs. The other point that's the burden here is on the students is the lifelong learning. You will not be a good petroleum engineer as soon as you graduate. The more time and the more effort you spend into your own learning will make you a much better petroleum engineer with time. Areas to grow skills in include energy efficiency, new businesses that were mentioned by some of my colleagues on the panel, data analytics and AI applications in petroleum. These seem to be the logical areas where we can grow the knowledge of a typical petroleum engineer in. When we talk about energy efficiency, this is probably one of the routes we decided to take in the department that I belong to, the Petroleum Engineering Department at the American University in Cairo. And to explain that, let me share this slide with you. This is the what we call energy flow of a country. This is Japan as an example. You can look at the energy flow for any country. They are similar. Maybe the energy mix could be different. So what you see on the left-hand side here is the primary energy sources that Japan uses in a particular year or used in a particular year. Then in the middle, you have how we transform the energy from primary source to a useful form that we can utilize. Useful forms that we can utilize energy in include residential, commercial, industrial, non-energy, like when we use some of these energy sources as raw material for petrochemicals, manufacturing industries, etc., and then transportation. What we have in the middle here is part of the energy supply chain. So electricity generation here refers to the power plants, and there are different types of power plants. There are power plants that run on gas, there are power plants that run on fuel oil, renewable power plants, etc., etc. We have another transition also, like refineries and gas plants. In refineries, we take the crude oil and we refine it into products, as everyone knows, that we can use in different applications. So this is the energy flow of a country. What I wanted to draw your attention to is this part on the right-hand side. The dark gray represents how much useful energy. We generated a lot of energy. This is how much we used usefully out of this energy. And the rejected energy captures how much energy that was wasted. Wasted because as extra heat, as energy that was not used, etc., etc. So as you can see here, in almost every country, the amount of energy that we waste is most of the time more than the useful energy that we use to manufacture products or light the streets or do anything with that energy. So this is a huge area and a huge resource that I think for us as energy producers lying on this side here, we have to know about this and we have to work in these areas to reduce the amount of rejected energy. We are in the oil industry, in the petroleum industry in general, we are big consumers of energy. So we have a place where we can work on energy efficiency, and hopefully our graduates will have these skills added to their subsurface and petroleum engineering skills. Thank you very much, and I will stop sharing my slides now, and we'll open the panel for discussion. I captured, please everyone, if you have questions, go ahead and add them to the Q&A session. I captured already some of the questions that were asked in the Q&A session, and I will start asking my fellow panelists some of these questions. So there was an important question on the skills for energy transition. And when I ask this question to the panelists, I would like for whoever is going to take a stab in this question to define the energy transition first, because there are so many different definitions of energy transition. So let's try to define what we mean by energy transition, and then answer the question to the students. What are the skills that are needed for energy transition?
Well, I guess I can start that if you want me to. We'll take that hot potato. So I guess you asked to define energy transition. I think that we use the word transition kind of, I think, in a little different way. I mean, when we think in terms of transition, that tends to imply change and moving away from and into something else. I think that we have to be careful with that terminology. As I think was really interesting about our presentations was we kind of had a lot of different views of kind of the energy future. And I think that it was a great representation of what's out there right now, right? We don't know the future. I mean, they're all predictions. But I think for me, energy transition is more, I think it would be better called energy evolution. We're going to evolve. I think we are evolving to lower carbon. So that's what it ends up being implied in the energy transition. So transitioning to lower carbon energy. How we get there is a whole nother realm, right? I mean, obviously renewables are low carbon, but you could also remove emissions from, CO2 emissions from oil and gas burning, and then you would have low carbon. So there's a lot of ways to transition into low carbon. So let me just say that in answer to what is transition to me, I think it's more evolution and it's transition to lower carbon. As far as the skills go, I think that if we stay within our industry, first of all, I think that we need skills. Your petroleum engineering skill sets are going to serve you well if you want to be involved in extracting more oil and gas. Okay, I think that's obvious. I think that one of the things that both Ivan and Lyle brought up that I thought was really good was petroleum engineers have really a unique skill set of base load understanding. So, we do a lot of different things, whether it's fluid flow or it's thermodynamics or it's mechanics, materials, or whatnot. So we are trained well for, I think, a lot of different industries and a lot of different situations. Moving ahead, though, I don't remember who said it, but I think the skill sets that we need to, first of all, lifelong learning is extremely important. I can't predict the changing technologies, but you have to be willing to stay up to speed with everything that's going on and what's changing, and you have to be adaptable. So I think that's the biggest thing as far as the skill sets. Obviously, data analytics and the whole data use of data is important. I mean, at least understanding when and why you need to use certain concepts. Maybe you're not an expert, but you know when to apply them, just like other facets of our industry. I think certainly being open to understanding how we apply our knowledge to other industries related, like CCUS and geothermal, are important. So I guess I think that adaptability is probably where I would leave it, and being ready and willing to continue to learn and grow in your understanding of whatever's coming down the road.
Very good, Terry. Thank you very much. Thank you for the definition of energy transition. I was worried that many people would think it's actually leaving the past, leaving the fossil fuels, and going into other renewables. And thank you also for your ideas on the skills. There is another question that I think is important to address here. And I think Ivan probably is more suited to address this question. The question is, renewable energy infrastructure will need to be produced from scratch, which is, of course, very expensive and time-consuming. So how much do you think oil companies through R&D and investment also can or are willing to do to encourage the investment in renewable?
So I can answer that question from BP's point of view, and we are making a big push for the transition or that evolution to happen quickly, right? So in our case, we are investing about 50% of our capex, basically the money that we invest growing the business, is going to go into clean energy or cleaner energy, and 50% is going to be going into hydrocarbons, right? So two elements there, right? First of all, the two things are important, right? It's not like we're moving away from oil. We're still investing into oil, but we are also investing into the future, right? Because oil is the present, and actually it's going to be also part of the future. But we need to develop a different part of that future through cleaner energy, right? So we are investing in solar, we are investing in wind, and in many cases we are taking advantage of some of the synergies that we see between different projects in oil and in the new energy, right? So for example, we are linking wind to hydrogen storage, to CCUS, to previously existing infrastructure in electricity, right? So there are many ways that you can use pre-existing infrastructure to make the new infrastructure easier to achieve, right? Or easier to complete. It's not like you need to start from zero every time, right? So it's actually to start easier and cheaper and more economic to start from an infrastructure that is already existing, right? I can give you one example. In the North Sea, we are having a big project it's called Teesside, right? And we are basically building upon infrastructure that is already present in Aberdeen, right? Aberdeen has traditionally been an oil hub, right? Where a lot of oil production has been generated for decades, right? So we are building new projects, wind, storage in the same location to take advantage of that existing infrastructure. So I think that makes things easier, right? Than starting to build from scratch.
Thank you, Ivan.
Can I add something there real quick? Do you mind if I add something? I mean, I think you brought up some really good things, Ivan. I mean, when we talk about investing in renewables, certainly companies like a BP and some of the super majors may invest directly in renewables to develop those technologies, certainly. But I would say most companies are at least on the periphery investing in renewables from the standpoint of decarbonizing their operations. So as an example, you brought up a good one, Ivan, is, you're going to probably try looking at installing wind and solar on an offshore platform to drive your, electricity out there. And so a company even like Carbo, we're not going to develop solar panels. I mean, we're not going to invest in that technology, but we are going to buy them. I mean, we are going to look at how do we take those panels, or how do we use solar, or how do we use maybe concentrated solar power or something to fuel our manufacturing process. So I think there's a couple of ways that we have to be careful when we say we're investing. There's direct investment, and then there's peripheral investment. And I think most companies are probably doing that.
Thank you. That was a good addition, Terry. So I think it is clear that traditional oil or traditional petroleum companies are investing in energy in general, including the renewable. The twist of that question was an important question by my good friend Hani Shahawi. So his question was, we're seeing low investment in traditional fossil fuels. So that's the opposite of the previous question. And everybody knows now, especially with the energy security and all of that, that fossil fuels are here to stay. So what can we do, or how do we encourage investment in traditional oil and gas? I know it's a tough question, so I will ask Lyle to tell us what he thinks, and we may ask the other panelists as well, because I don't think the answer to this question would be direct. So please go ahead, Lyle.
So I have to get you to qualify the question. When you say traditional oil and gas, are you speaking about the unconventional, like the traditional higher firm?
I would imagine my good friend Hani Shahawi had both in mind. So now the unconventional is becoming conventional. So go ahead. I mean, investment in fossil fuels.
That's a lot. I think that we need to look at the data mining of all of our past, probably the last 15 years of completions, and try to figure out some better cause and effect relationships as far as producing higher streams and longer lasting streams of oil and gas, particularly as a permeability of reservoir rock. I mean, it's really funny. I hear, and I don't know if Ivan's company does this, I don't think so, but I hear about a lot of majors and super majors that have gone to a real, what we call a cookie cutter completion scenario. And they're basically, we're not completing reservoirs, we're mining, because they're like putting a fracture every 10 feet in a lateral. And one reason that they do that is because of the permeability, the fluid flow between the two fractures is so slow because the reservoir permeability is so low. So we need to figure out ways of getting something better than basic stimulation in those types of reservoirs. The other thing that I think, and of course I'm going to contradict a little bit about what I said earlier, the conventional reservoirs are basically they're being depleted. You have to look at that resource triangle that Holmes put out years ago, and you'll see that it's easy to find unconventional reservoirs, but it's very difficult to find conventional reservoirs. And they've all, I don't know that they've all been developed, basking in 98% of them. There's no real reason the future development in, except to use it for carbon capture, CO2 flood them with water flow. So I don't know. I don't think I answered the question. That's one thing. Quality. The conventional world is pretty much moving.
Okay, thank you, Lyle. If anyone else from my fellow panelists wants to add something to what we just said.
So if I understood, the question was about investment in oil and gas, right? Versus
Yes.
investment in the new energy or cleaner energy. And actually, we had an experience in that regard in BP. And 4 or 5 years ago, there was a new strategy that was proposed by our new CEO, right? And he was extremely aggressive, going green, going towards wind and solar. But we quickly realized that the driving force here is economics, right? So yes, you want to do good, you want to be cleaner, you want to take into account climate change, but the economics have to make sense, right? And we realized that going into those projects, you don't make as much money as you do in the oil industry, right? So for that reason, there was a little bit of a correction, a course correction that happened about a year ago when our CEO said, well, we're still going to increase, we're going to keep growing our oil business, is making it stronger so it can support that transition into other elements that are not as profitable, right? So I think that, to me, the driving force is economics, right? Moving into these new areas, these areas of clean energy has to make sense, not only for the planet, but also has to make sense for our stakeholders, our partners, and everybody, right? So it has to meet those two elements.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ivan. And if you allow me, I will elaborate a little bit and offer some answers as well, or some ideas. I think what you mentioned about BP has been reciprocated by other European countries. Traditional American oil companies did not go that much aggressive into green. So it looks like everybody is readjusting now and doing both green energy plus the traditional oil and gas. So that's clear when we hear the news. Another idea, and since we have the 2024 SPE president with us on the panel, so one of the things that we probably need to do, and maybe SPE can play a role into this, is re-educating the public, because we have been seeing a lot of negative propaganda against the oil and gas, and this is affecting the young students and all of that. We probably need to, I don't want to say advertise, because oil companies don't like advertisements usually, but we really need to make sure that the information that the young engineers have access to is the right information, and it is not biased information. I don't know if SPE can play a role in this, but for sure we try to play this role in universities for those who elect to go into petroleum engineering education.
Can I comment on that?
Sure, please.
So look, you're exactly right. I think a couple of thoughts go through my mind, but I've been in the industry over 40 years. I think we all know that we've had pressure on our industry for all 40 of those years. We've always had pressure on us for various reasons. Typically, it's got to do with environmental or sustainability now. And we as an industry have probably done a poor job of portraying ourselves in a positive light. We just continue to go on with business as we continue to do what we do best, and that is recover hydrocarbons and do it in the most environmentally sensitive manner possible. And we tended to do that. Unfortunately, over the last few years, people figured out, well, if we just don't invest in these oil and gas companies, that's gonna take care of things. So the question's a great one. as far as under investment in our industry. As far as the SPE, one of the things we have is a program called Energy for Me. It's an online portal where you can gather information exactly what you're talking about, Ahmed, but it's also something that needs to be updated. We've had this for several years, and at COVID, we stopped really kind of updating the system. So it would give you PowerPoints so you could go to talk to schools and things like that, but it needs to be updated. And one of the things that I'm trying to do this year, it's why I called it my theme, Creating Our Energy Future. But one of the things I want to do is SPE, first of all, can't advocate, but what we can do is educate. And so, but SP and BP and, pick your company. I mean, they can do some things as far as advocating, but what their employees can do, their 50,000 employees or 110,000 SP members or whatever they are, they can have a much wider impact. So what I hope is that SP can help educate our members so that then they can go out and talk to their friends and neighbors, and then we'd be able to multiply this. And I think that if you look at some of the major oil and gas companies, they're doing the same thing. I mean, I think that their messaging is on point, and I think that they're probably working with their employees to try to help educate as well. But I think that's the role that SPE can play, and it's something I'd like us to work on this year is updating that Energy for Me platform so that we can, use our members to go out and be the advocates.
Thank you very much, Terry. There are several questions around AI and the role of AI into geoscience in particular. So some of the questions are around the idea: are there roles in the future for people who combine the AI with geoscience or with petroleum engineering? So if you can address this question, that would be great. So who wants to go?
I think so. That's being done, and I can't remember his name. He's a professor at West Virginia. He's been doing it for quite a while. There's a guy who used to be at Halliburton, used to be in Carbo, named Bob Shelley, did it quite a bit. You have to have what we coined the phrase expert systems. You have to be smart about what the artificial intelligence will bring to the table, because it can mislead you pretty easily. That's the big fear about AI. But one of them, that's a very key thing that has to be developed, and it's pretty that field of opportunity is extremely big.
Okay, thank you, Lyle. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, so I have a number of examples where we're using data science and artificial intelligence in subsurface and subsurface analysis. For example, we are using artificial intelligence and machine learning to do quick seismic inversion, right? So instead of going through a process that usually takes many months to do it the standard way, right? To do your seismic quality checks, the inversion itself, and then translating that into products that we use takes a long time. So we have seen that using artificial intelligence and machine learning, we can reduce that from months to weeks, right? So, and that's really useful when you're trying to make a decision on whether or not to develop a new reservoir or a new area of the reservoir, right? We are also using machine learning for completions in unconventional. So something close to Lyle's heart, right? Because in unconventionals, we have tons of data. We have many wells that have many data points, and we use those to guide our completions, right? So we were teaching some machine learning algorithms to help our completion engineers predict when they were going to have screen outs, for example, right? So it will give you a warning sign saying, hey, something is happening in the next 10 minutes. We expect you to see a screen out. That way they can react and try to address it before it happens, right? We are also using machine
I think
learning.
we're out of time. So
Okay.
I think there are many applications, of course, of AI, and the message that we can leave the students with is to yes, grow into AI applications in petroleum engineering, but also look into do not forget the fundamentals. So use AI as a skill, like a software like Excel, for example, similar to that, and use it in applications. Thank you very much. We're out of time. Ahmed Garhi is going to cut the electricity supply on the panel now. So thank you, my fellow panelists. I really enjoyed my time here, and thank you for the organizing committee for the invitation as well.